To dovetail or not to dovetail? That is the question I'm hoping to answer today. How's it? My name is Dylan and welcome to Ply Creations, where we finally head back to the lathe. In the video that I'm sharing the link on the screen for you, I mentioned that I'd like to do a video where I show you how to turn a tenon for your four-jaw chuck. I grew up on the lathe calling it a tenon, but in my research for this video I learned that a spigot may be the more accurate technical term, but that's also dependent on where you are in the world. So in the comment section, let me know where you live and what you call it, and that may help a little bit, so at least I can find out if I'm the only one on the planet calling it a tenon. I'm not sure that I am. We'll be looking at 4 aspects of the tenon that you will be turning, or the spigot that goes into the four-jaw chuck. And we'll start with the size of the tenon, then we'll go over to the depth of the tenon. We will talk about to dovetail or not to dovetail, and you may find that section slightly interesting. And then lastly, we talk about the shoulder. The shoulder is actually quite a important factor in the bigger scheme of things in having a decent grip on your blanks on the lathe. I've generated 3D renders that I'm going to be using to show and describe what I'm talking about, and I tried to take photos of the tenon in the chuck and it really didn't come out that hot, so I used 3D renders. If you stick around until the end of the video, you will get a link where you can go to download or sign up and then download a printable document that you can print out with everything we're going to be discussing today and keep it at your lathe handy. Also, you'll have access to all the printables that I have created up to this point for my channel and my website, and you will also have access to all the printouts going forward. So without further ado, let's talk about Tenon size. So before we get into the size of the spigot, I'll tell you more about the chuck that I'll be using for today. You can never have enough chucks, you can't ever have enough bowl gouges, and if you do flat work, you can never have enough hand planes. I suffer of all 3, but today I am using my Nova chuck manufactured by Tenon Tools. Now ideally, to have the best possible grip, your tenon size needs to be so that it's very close to the natural curvature of your jaws just before they close. And the reason for that is, and I'll show you the first graphic for today, that will show you quite clearly a correctly sized spigot. And what that allows is a maximum amount of material on your jaws to grip the walls of the spigot. So that is ideal. Of course, the manufacturer states that you can go up in size on your spigots, and the next graphic will show you how the jaws will grip in that case. It still grips securely, but not as secure as having the tenon size just larger than when the jaws close completely, and the tips will dig in it, and if you turn a foot and you're not planning on neatening that up, that may be an issue. So tenon size wise, try and go for the natural curvature of your jaws just before they close, and that is irrespective of the jaw size. That's sort of what you're aiming for. So at some point you may consider using larger jaws. So from there we go on to the spigot depth. And onto the often misunderstood aspects of spigot or tenon length. And I find that especially under the new turners that come to my classes or comments that I've seen out on the internet, is the belief that the bottom of the tenon or spigot should sit on top of the bottom of your jaws, and that is not the case. I'm showing you the first graphic of a correctly turned tenon, or at least tenon length, and you'll see that it sits above the jaws. It provides no advantage to the strength of the tenon or the grip of the jaws by placing the bottom of the spigot on top of the jaws or the inside of the jaws. I'm using spigot and tenon interchangeably at this point, but it provides no advantage. On the contrary, if the tenon is too long, it will lift the blank up from the jaws, and the shoulder will not register to the top of the jaws. And you'll see that in the graphic I am showing. Then you do not have a decent grip on the blank. You'll see when I turn the example a little bit later is sometimes I can't get into or very close to the live center on my tailstock, and that sometimes results in a little bit of a nib remaining at the bottom of the spigot. But as long as that nib sits inside the hole without touching any area of the jaws themselves, you are good. But the bottom of the tenon should not rest on the inside of the jaws. So next we'll move on to the controversial matter of dovetailing or not dovetailing. So onto the dovetail debate. It shouldn't really be a debate as much as it is a rule of thumb. Turning a dovetail on the spigot is really depending on the jaws that you are using at the time on the chuck. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about dovetailing the spigot, is in effect you're putting a slope on the wall of your spigot, and the bottom of the spigot will have a larger diameter than the spigot where it meets the shoulder. Now remember, the bottom is the part that's not supposed to be touching the bottom of your jaws. So there'd be a slight slope on the spigot. Now the rule of thumb is it depends on your jaws that you are using. If your jaws are sloped on the inside, allowing you to use a dovetailed spigot, you dovetail the spigot. If you use jaws that are straight walled or vertical, you use a straight walled spigot. I'm showing you examples or the 3D renders of each one of my jaw sets. First, I'm showing you the Nova jaws, and you'll see it's got a slight slope on the inside of the jaws, and the Charnwood has straight walled areas in the jaws. And you also see it's got a little rim around the upper edge. On the Techno tool or the Nova chuck jaws, it's the dovetail that provides the secure grip. On the Charnwood jaws or the straight wall jaws, it's that little rim at the top that provides a secured grip right at the shoulder. I'm showing you what you're looking for as far as dovetail goes with the correct jaws. First of all the Nova, and then I'm moving over and I'm showing you the Charnwood jaws, and you'll see you've got a straight walled spigot in there. Of course, that's the rule of thumb, and often rules of thumbs have some exceptions, and sometimes woodturners will place or put a very slight dovetail or a very slight slope on their spigots, even if they use a straight walled jaw. Also, I'm showing you what you are looking at if you use a straight walled spigot on a dovetail jaw. Again, the Nova, moving over to the Charnwood chuck, what it would look like if I have quite a steep slope on a tenon and try and use it on the Charnwood chuck. Let's talk shoulder, and you want the shoulder to be perpendicular at 90 degrees with the surface of the spigot. Now, of course, the moment you put a dovetail on the spigot, that's no longer going to be perpendicular, the two angles between the two. What I do when I turn the tenons is I have a straight tenon and then make sure my shoulder is perpendicular to that before I add any dovetails. You want the shoulder to sit flush on the top of your jaws, and that stops your blank from rocking back and forth while you're doing your turning. And it especially is important while your blank is still rough and you haven't rounded it and it's not balanced. So that's quite an important factor. I'm showing you an image of what you are aiming for, what you want. I'm following that with an image of what it would look like if the shoulder slopes away from the jaws. Another factor when shaping the shoulder, and you'll often see that or hear that turners say this to you, is you have to clean the inside corner of the shoulder, and that is effectively where the shoulder meets the spigot. That corner needs to be as clean, and there should be no waste of fluff in there, because as you compress your jaws onto the spigot, you want as clean a connection at the point where the spigot and the shoulder meet as you possibly can, and that provides you with a better grip. So that covers the 4 aspects of what is important when you turn spigots for use in 4-jaw chucks. I'll be taking you over to the lathe and quickly showing you, it will show you through the process of how I turn the spigots that I use on my 4-jaw chucks. So join me at the lathe. At the lathe, and we can finally implement the theory that we've learned. As I mentioned earlier, I will give you access to a downloadable document that you can print and keep at your lathe with you with all the information that we've covered up to this point. Just scan the QR code on the screen or follow the link in the description. Sign up and I'll send you the link. Moving on to turning the tenon, and I'll do that using my skew. I've got my blank between centers. I've checked that everything turns freely and I'm happy with where I am. The blank isn't exactly square, and generally I don't round my blanks until before I've turned the tenon and put the blank into a 4-jaw chuck. Best way to find the size of the tenon is to use a set of calipers like these. How did I measure? What's the size of this? As I closed the jaws on the chuck completely and then just measured this or open it up against the jaws, and I'm going over slightly because I am putting a tenon, I am forming a tenon, but I am putting a dovetail on it. So as the dovetail gets smaller where it meets the shoulder, I still want that to be big enough diameter wise for the jaws to close up on them. If I make them too small, the blank will simply just spin in the jaws and sort of defeats the point. So I'll be starting up the lathe and getting on with the skew, starting to form the tenon. I'm going to make the tenon over large, and I'm going to show you how I use a parting tool just to get the, well, not over large diameter wise, but over large length, and I'll use the parting tool to get it to final length. So onto forming the basic size and shape of the tenon, paying attention to keeping the shoulder square to the tenon itself. So let's get turning. So as I'm using the skew to form the spigot, I'm also using then the calipers to check my size as I'm going along. Okay, that should be to the correct size, and if I did my job correctly, the shoulder should be square to the tenon as well. I am going to make it larger so that I can make it shorter and show you how to do that. I'm using the size of the tenon as I've turned it at the beginning just to judge the final diameter. Now my tenon is too long. I think the wall of my jaws are 10 millimeters high, and this is definitely too long. So the easiest way to fix that is to use my parting tool. That allows me to get in as close as I can to my live center on my tailstock. So I've got a little nib remaining at the bottom, and as I explained earlier, as long as that fits into the hole of the jaws, I'm fine. So I'm happy with the depth of the spigot. I'm now going to put on the dovetail, and while I'm doing the dovetail, I'm also going to clean up the corner where the shoulder and the spigot meet, and for that I'm going back to my skew. So I formed the tenon, and next is the proof is in the pudding, so I'll get it into the chuck and show you the result. So with the spigot turned, fitted and tested, I'm happy with the way the 4-jaw chuck is gripping my blank. You would have seen me bring up tail support. If ever you have any doubt on how well your blank is being gripped by your chuck, or if your blank is out of balance, bring in tail support to provide you with more security, at least until such time as your blank is in balance. And if you can use the tail support, it's a good idea. I'm leaving the link to the video in which I made this promise that I'll make this video on the screen, and you'll find the link in the description as well. Kept my word on this one. And if you want access to the downloadable document, scan the QR code on the screen, and again you can find the link in the description there as well. Head over there, sign up, and you'll get access to the full library. But that brings us to the end of today's turning session. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Make sure that spigot or tenon fits well. Still need to tell me which you guys prefer. But until I see you again next time, I hope you have a good one. Cheers.